My name is Amir Shaw. I have worked as a forest ranger in Pine Valley for nearly 15 years. On maps, Pine Valley looks ordinary. Dense trees, narrow trails, long stretches of untouched forest, hikers, campers, photographers. People come here looking for quiet. During the day, the valley feels calm. At night, it feels unfinished. Officially, Pine Valley is classified as a high-risk wilderness area due to terrain and weather. Unofficially, among rangers, it's known as something else. The place where people are last seen, not found, not confirmed dead, just last seen. The case that changed how I understood this place happened 7 years ago. A hiker named Mark Edson entered the valley just after noon. He signed the registry, listed his planned route, and told me he'd be back before sunset. He never returned. Search teams were deployed within hours. We used tracking dogs, aerial sweeps, thermal imaging. Nothing. No trail, no body, no signs of injury. The only thing we found was his backpack. It was placed neatly on a rock, several miles off the marked trail, in a spot that made no sense, not dropped, not abandoned in panic, placed as if someone wanted us to know how far he made it. After that, similar cases began appearing more frequently. Over time, a pattern became impossible to ignore. Every missing person was last seen inside Pine Valley. Most were alone. Almost all had commented on how quiet the forest felt. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet where sound feels absorbed, where footsteps don't echo the way they should, where even your own breathing feels out of place. I experienced it myself one night during patrol. I saw a light moving between the trees. Slow, deliberate. I called out. No response. When I reached the spot, the light was gone, but the ground told a different story. Footprints leading forward, and then stopping. No sign of turning back, no sign of struggle, just an ending. That same night, my radio crackled to life. A voice came through, faint, distorted. I can't find the trail anymore. The voice sounded familiar, too familiar. It belonged to someone who had been last seen in Pine Valley 2 years earlier. After that, we established rules we never wrote down. No solo patrols after sunset. If you hear a voice you recognize, do not answer. If someone says they're just going a little further, turn them around. Because in Pine Valley, a little further is rarely measurable. This forest doesn't take people all at once. It removes them slowly from trails, from records, from memory. Eventually their name exists only in a file marked Last Seen, Pine Valley. If you ever pass through this area and notice how quiet it feels, not calm but attentive, leave. Because in Pine Valley, people don't simply disappear. They are last seen. The missing don't leave the forest. After Mark Edson vanished, Pine Valley was never the same to me again. Not because the forest changed, but because I started noticing how carefully it hid things. In the weeks following his disappearance, we expanded our search radius again and again. Trails were rewalked, ravines checked, every logical outcome exhausted, and still nothing. That's when I noticed something subtle but disturbing. The forest wasn't erasing evidence, it was preventing it from forming. No broken branches, no disturbed soil, no animal activity around where people vanished. It was as if whatever happened didn't involve struggle, or movement, or even panic, just absence. Over the next 3 years there were 6 more cases, different ages, different backgrounds. But the circumstances were almost identical. Every one of them had been seen calm shortly before vanishing. No signs of fear, no emergency calls, no attempts to run. One woman, Sarah Lynn, was last seen sitting on a fallen log, writing in a notebook. Her partner had gone ahead on the trail, assuming she'd catch up. She never did. We found the notebook. The last line read, "It feels like the forest is listening." That sentence appears in multiple cases. Different handwriting, different people, same wording. That's when I stopped believing this was coincidence. The missing weren't taken suddenly. They were noticed first, and once the forest noticed you, it didn't need to chase. Another pattern emerged. Every disappearance happened in areas where the trails were older than the maps, paths created before official surveys, before signage, before GPS coordinates were reliable. Places where the forest had decided the routes, not us. During patrols, I began marking these locations privately. No reports, no official records, just notes, because the last ranger who tried to formally map them retired early after claiming some trails moved when he wasn't looking. I didn't want that reputation. One evening, just before sunset, I tested something. I stood at the edge of one of those unmarked paths and waited. The forest grew quiet. Not naturally quiet, deliberately. I felt the urge to step forward, not curiosity, permission. Like the trail was waiting to see if I would accept it. I didn't. I turned back. Behind me, the path looked shorter than it had moments before. That's when I understood something critical. Pine Valley doesn't trap people. It invites them to continue. And once you accept that invitation, you're no longer where anyone else can find you. Search teams assume the missing fall, get injured, or wander off. But that's not what happens here. They don't wander. They continue into places the forest doesn't share. And that's why they're only ever recorded as last seen. Because in Pine Valley, no one actually watches them leave. Some people come back, but they don't stay. Not everyone who goes missing in Pine Valley stays missing. That was the part we didn't include in public reports, because the few who came back raised more questions than the ones who never did. The first return happened 2 winters after Mark Edson vanished. A man named Elliot Moore walked out of the forest just before dawn. He appeared at the southern access road, barefoot, clothes torn, skin pale from exposure. He was alive, coherent, uninjured. And according to his family, he'd been missing for 11 days. Elliot claimed he'd only been gone for a few hours. He remembered entering Pine Valley, remembered walking off the trail, remembered hearing the forest go quiet. After that, nothing unusual. No fear, no confusion, just a sense that he'd gone further than planned. Doctors found no signs of dehydration or hypothermia consistent with 11 days in the wilderness. What they did find was something subtle. His internal clock was wrong. Elliot consistently underestimated the passage of time by large margins. Minutes felt like seconds. Hours felt like moments. When asked how long he thought he'd been missing, he said, "Long enough for the forest to decide we didn't know what that meant, but we pretended we did." Over the next year, 2 more people returned. Both said similar things. That the forest didn't feel dangerous, that it felt complete, that time didn't behave the way they expected. Both struggled to stay in populated areas afterward. They became restless, withdrawn, uncomfortable indoors. One of them told me privately, "It's louder here. Out there, everything fits." Within 6 months, both returned to Pine Valley. Voluntarily, we didn't stop them. Officially, we couldn't. Unofficially, we knew it would make things worse. People who return don't come back broken. They come back adjusted, like part of them is still responding to something we can't hear. After that, we added another unspoken rule. If someone returns, you help them leave the area. You don't interview them extensively. You don't ask what they saw, because the more they talked about it, the more unstable they became. One man began drawing maps, not of trails, of gaps. Spaces where the forest felt thinner. He said those were the places where it was easiest to continue. He stopped drawing when he realized the gaps were moving. I encountered one returnee myself during a routine patrol. He stood at the trailhead, staring into the trees. I asked if he needed help. He smiled and said, "No, I'm just remembering how it listens." I escorted him out. 3 weeks later, his name appeared on the missing persons list again. Same location, same time of day. This time, no search was launched. We already knew the outcome. The returns taught us something critical. Pine Valley doesn't consume people, it reorients them. And once someone has been reoriented, normal life no longer fits. That's why the forest doesn't need to hold on to everyone. Some people leave, but they never really come back. The trails that only exist at night. After the first returnees disappeared again, we stopped pretending Pine Valley followed consistent geography. It didn't. The valley had 2 versions of itself. The one hikers saw during the day, and the one that emerged after sunset. Most people never noticed the difference, but rangers did, because trails began appearing where none existed before. The first confirmed report came from a seasonal ranger named Lucas Reed. He was working an evening patrol near the eastern ridge when he radioed in, confused. "There's a trail here I don't recognize," he said. "It's marked, but the sign doesn't match our system." I told him to send coordinates. The GPS reading placed him in an open stand of trees with no recorded paths. But Lucas insisted the trail was there, wide, cleared, worn from use. He described the marker as old wood, hand-carved, no paint, no symbols we used. By the time I reached the area, the trail was gone. No disturbed ground, no signpost, no indication it had ever existed. Lucas requested a transfer within a month. After that, we began quietly tracking temporal trails, paths that only appeared under certain conditions. Low light, minimal wind, absolute silence. These trails never showed up on satellite imagery, never appeared in daylight inspections, but returnees knew them. They could describe turns and landmarks with disturbing accuracy. One man drew a trail that curved inward, looping back on itself without crossing. He said, "You don't walk these trails, you agree to them." We tested that statement. One night just after dusk, I stood at a known anomaly site. Nothing was visible. I waited. As the forest quieted, the path became implied, not visible, felt, like knowing where a door is in a dark room without touching it. I took one step forward. The pressure increased, not physical, cognitive, a strong sense that continuing would make turning back unnecessary. I stepped away. The feeling vanished instantly. That's when we understood how people were being lost. They weren't falling into traps. They weren't following wrong paths. They were responding to context. The forest presents options only when certain conditions are met. And once you accept one, the forest stops offering alternatives. That's why search teams fail. They're looking for footprints and broken branches. But the trails that matter don't disturb the ground. They alter perception. One ranger tried to photograph a night trail. The image showed nothing, but the metadata recorded movement, hundreds of steps, in a direction that didn't exist. We added a final internal guideline. If a trail feels intentional, leave immediately. Real trails don't need consent. That's the difference. The ones T.hat appear at night are not meant to be followed. They are meant to be accepted. And once you do, you're no longer in the version of Pine Valley that anyone else can search, the names that Pine Valley erases. Every ranger station keeps records, logs, incident reports, personnel files, search summaries. Pine Valley does too. But our records have a problem. They change, not all at once, not dramatically, quietly. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was a clerical error. A missing name in an old search report. I remembered the ranger clearly, Evan Holt. He'd been part of a two-person patrol that never came back from the western slope. I remembered his face, his voice, the way he laughed when he was nervous, but his name wasn't in the file anymore. The report still existed. The incident was still documented, but the personnel list had one fewer name. I checked the backup archive. Same thing. I asked another senior ranger if he remembered Evan. He paused. Said, "That name sounds familiar, but I can't place it." That was the first warning sign. Pine Valley doesn't just take people, it removes references to them. We started cross-checking, quietly. Anytime someone disappeared under unclear circumstances, we'd monitor how long their name stayed intact in the system. The pattern was consistent. Within 2 to 3 weeks, casual mentions stopped. Within 1 to 2 months, official documents began showing gaps. Within 6 months, their name felt unfamiliar even to coworkers. Photos faded too, not erased, just less noticeable. Your eyes slid past their face like it didn't matter. One dispatcher admitted something terrifying. She said when she typed certain missing names into the database, her fingers hesitated, like her hands didn't want to finish spelling them. Not fear, resistance, as if the system itself rejected those entries. We discovered something worse when we reviewed audio logs. Radio transmissions from missing rangers still existed, but the names had been replaced with static. You could hear the voice clearly, but when they said their own name, there was nothing, just a brief distortion, like the sound of wind through leaves. Pine Valley doesn't want names remembered. Because names anchor people to shared reality. And the forest doesn't want anchors. That's why returnees are dangerous. They still have names. But the forest is in the process of deciding whether to keep them. One man who returned after 3 days in the valley stopped responding to his name entirely. You could say it directly to his face. No reaction. But if you described him without naming him, he'd turn his head. He later vanished again. This time permanently. We changed our behavior after that. We stopped saying the names of the missing out loud. Stopped writing them unless absolutely required. Because every time you reinforce a name, you delay what Pine Valley is trying to do. And when you interfere too much, the valley notices. That's why ranger turnover is high here. Not because the job is dangerous in the usual way, but because the longer you stay, the more likely Pine Valley starts learning your name. And once it does, it won't erase you right away. It will wait until fewer people remember how to spell it. Until your photo blends into the background. Until saying your name feels unnecessary. That's when you become easy. Why Pine Valley lets some people come back. For a long time we believed returnees were mistakes. People who somehow escaped whatever takes others. We were wrong. Pine Valley allows some people to return. And it does so deliberately. The first clue was behavioral consistency. Every returnee, no matter their age, background, or reason for entering the valley, came back with the SAME, subtle changes. Not dramatic, not cinematic, small things. They avoided reflective surfaces. They paused before answering simple questions. They hesitated when asked about time. One woman sat in the ranger office for over an hour, calmly drinking water, before suddenly asking, "Am I early or late?" We didn't know how to answer. Returnees also displayed a strange awareness of boundaries. They never wandered near anomaly zones again, never stepped onto night trails. It was as if Pine Valley had marked them, like a test subject released back into the population. The most disturbing pattern emerged during interviews. Whenever we asked returnees to describe what happened to them, their stories differed in details, but aligned in structure. They all described being guided, not chased, being watched, not attacked, being evaluated. One man said, "It felt like I was filling out a form, without writing anything." Another said, "I was kept somewhere until I made the right decision. I don't know what the decision was." That's when we realized something essential. Pine Valley is not predatory. It's selective. It doesn't want everyone. It wants compatibility. Those who panic too quickly disappear. Those who resist too hard are removed. But those who observe, who adapt, who accept uncertainty, they're released, not because they're safe, but because they're useful. Returnees carry Pine Valley back with them, not physically, conceptually. They normalize what they experienced. They describe it calmly. They minimize it. They downplay danger that encourages others to enter. The valley learns faster that way. We tested a theory once. We asked a returnee to guide us near an anomaly zone. During daylight, he refused, not verbally. His body wouldn't move, muscle resistance without fear. Tears streamed down his face as he said, "I can't." It didn't say I could. That confirmed it. Returnees are under constraints, rules they don't fully understand. Rules enforced not by threat, but by certainty. Pine Valley doesn't need guards. It installs boundaries directly into people. That's why we don't debrief returnees anymore. The more they talk, the more the valley spreads, the more it becomes acceptable, understandable, normal, and Pine Valley thrives on normalization. It doesn't want secrecy. It wants familiarity. That's why it lets some people go, not as survivors, but as carriers. When Pine Valley decides you finished, there's a moment every long-term ranger in Pine Valley reaches. It doesn't come with fear or warnings or signs. It comes with clarity. You realize the valley no longer reacts to you. The quiet doesn't deepen when you stop. The trails don't shift when you look away. The pressure doesn't build when dusk falls. You are no longer being observed. That's when you know Pine Valley has learned everything it needs from you. I noticed it in my 12th year. I was walking a perimeter route just before sunset, one of the safer ones, well mapped, frequently used. I stopped at a clearing where, years earlier, a night trail used to appear. Nothing happened. No sensation, no pull, no awareness. The forest felt indifferent. At first that felt like relief. Then I understood what it actually meant. Pine Valley wasn't interested anymore. That's what happens right before someone leaves. Not physically, functionally. I started noticing other changes. My name appeared less often in reports. New rangers asked questions that used to come to me and didn't anymore. During briefings, people talked around me instead of to me, not deliberately, naturally, like I was already becoming background. That's how it works. Before Pine Valley removes someone, it reduces their presence. It loosens their connection to the system. It lets memory fade. Because disappearance is easier when fewer people are paying attention. The last ranger who stayed too long, Thomas Reed, didn't vanish on patrol. He finished his shift, went home, and simply stopped coming back. His house was empty, his vehicle untouched, his phone still charging, but his name disappeared within weeks. When I asked about him, a new supervisor said, "Who?" That's when I filed my transfer request. Not out of fear, out of timing. The valley doesn't chase rangers. It waits to see who leaves on their own. Those who don't, eventually stop being part of the version of Pine Valley anyone else occupies. That's why I'm writing this now, not as a warning, as a record. People aren't last seen in Pine Valley because it's dangerous in obvious ways. They're last seen because the valley decides when observation ends. Once it does, there's nothing left to find. No trail, no body, no absence dramatic enough to question, just a quiet reduction. So, if you ever visit Pine Valley and notice how normal it feels, if the forest doesn't react to you at all, leave immediately. Because when Pine Valley stops paying attention, it means you are no longer part of the version of the world that returns. End.